Starring Bela Day in
But Ma, that's my favorite movie. Oh, well, all right. But don't you spend too much time in front of that TV, do you hear me? Yes, Ma. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. But Ma, that's my favorite movie. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. You're a real one, period. And if you are a new listener and this is your first time listening to this podcast, welcome. And we have some great content for you today. So, we're going to be doing something a little bit differently in this episode compared to the other ones. And I guess we'll go ahead and start with the title here, which is a little different as well. It is, But Ma, That's Gone with the Wind. So if you haven't guessed yet, we're going to be talking about the movie Gone with the Wind. Now, what I do with my podcast is I plan my episodes ahead of time. And when I wanted to choose what movie I wanted to do an analysis of, I knew I wanted to do something that was a classic. Because I definitely want to pay homage to classic movies as well. So, not just talking about modern movies, but talking about movies that are deemed to be classics. And I have been on an absolute mission to catch up and watch all of the movies that are must-sees, that are classics, right? And so I've never seen this movie. So you're first-handedly like learning, and we're going to be talking about this movie together. And it's like it's a first-hand experience because, like I said, this was my first time watching the movie. So it was definitely an experience. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about one movie. So normally my previous 9 episodes, I'll have a theme, and I will talk about 2 different movies, like briefly go over them, give you some behind the scenes information, and that, just introducing a movie that I enjoy watching. But in this episode, we're going to go through just one movie in its entirety. And basically like a play-by-play, scene by scene, you're basically going to get an oral version of the movie. But before we actually dive into this movie, I wanted to just kind of talk about classic movies as a whole, because I feel like it can be defined by 3 different factors. And of course, if you agree with me, let me know, comment. If you disagree, or if you have some sort of other perspective on it, definitely comment, let me know. I would love to, discuss this, because that's why I have a podcast about movies, because I love talking about movies. Duh. Okay, so the 3 things I feel as though, like the 3 different types of classics. We have a classic by time, which in my opinion, I feel that's what makes Gone with the Wind a classic, but it can also merge with another one, which would be classic by content. So the type of story, the type of characters, the dialogue, the situations, all of that will deem it a classic where people will continue to watch it years down the line. So it's not simply because of its time, here's this movie, it was greatly made, but because of what's actually in the movie. And I feel anything that's classic by time can be made at any point in history, or can be made at in any year. So like, let's say, for example, we had a movie come out in 2019, but that's a classic movie because of what it's about. And then we have cult classics, which I would say that a cult classic is a movie that's definable by more than the general story, but by the individual characters, or maybe the quirkiness of the story, or the one-liners. You can quote this movie so easily, or there's just things or certain aspects that are very vivid within the story that it's not like your typical classic, but it's it's a cult classic. And just looking at, by definition, what a cult classic is, typically a movie or book that is popular or fashionable among a particular group or section of society. So this is relating to a certain group of people. So it has to have some sort of humor or some sort of dialogue or people that can relate to a certain group. But I feel like it's more than, I think it's just what's within it, if that makes sense. Like they have, one that I can think of off the top of my head is like Mean Girls. I mean, there are certain days in the movie that people will literally go back to that day and remember it came from that movie, which that's actually the next episode is going to be Mean Girl. We're going to go into cult classics. And yeah, let me just talk about that too. So I will be doing classic movies because you have to pay homage to those at the end of the day, because they are a huge part of how movies are made today, where movies branch from, the idea, like good examples of well-made movies that, will stand the test of time. And so I'll be talking about more classic movies, and then I want to talk about cult classics as well. And yes, that's definitely going to be that's a little sneak peek. You'll know what will be going on next Thursday if you listen to the episode. But yes, Mean Girls will be the next one. So yeah, those are the three that I think really define the classics, and I'm really excited to, dive into this series as well. And then really just being able to watch these movies. I'm seeing these movies for the first time. I'm seeing them on my own time, because I cannot stand when people, like, to a certain extent, people want me to, you have to watch this movie. But I have to want to watch it, because if I want to watch it, I want to enjoy it, and I won't look at it in a subjective way and already count it out and be like, I'm bored. Now, before I get into talking about the whole movie, I just want to say this. I am going to talk about it objectively and watch the movie for what it is. And then at the end, I'm going to give my final thoughts on it and how I honestly feel, not only just to this movie, but just to classics in general. So you'll really know how I feel, because even though I am going to watch these classics, I do have sort of a side eye to it, but I'm going to share all of that at the end. And yeah, let's just get started into the movie. So, Gone with the Wind. This was released December 15th, 1939. And like I've told y'all before, y'all know my Bible is IMDb, and on there it has said January 7th, 1940. So I'm not sure, because everywhere you look, Gone with the Wind is considered to come out in 1939. So I'm not quite sure what, unless maybe the Hollywood premiere, the official premiere is December 15th, and maybe the national release was January 7th, 1940. But either way, well known, this movie came out in 1939 and got a whole bunch of praise. And they were even throwing parades and everything else. Like, this movie was such a big deal in its time. And the runtime of this movie, you will not believe this, because I had no idea. I normally don't look to see how long a movie is, but I don't expect it to be super long. Why didn't nobody tell me this movie was 3 hours and 58 minutes? It's 2 discs. Now, I bought this movie, I actually bought this movie some months back, because I think it was on like $3 or $5. And I was like, well, it's a classic. It's not that much. Maybe I could even end up doing like a review or analysis of the movie. So, yeah, it came in handy. It's good to talk about movies I already own. But anyways, so yeah, and what's crazy is this movie came under fire right when the protests were coming out. The Black Lives Matter movement became more prominent, and this was one of the movies that was talked about, which I think is kind of crazy because HBO has had this movie on their platform. And apparently they just removed it completely because they felt the content was, of course, insensitive to Black people because how it depicts Black people within slavery. You know, they dumb them down, they make them less than, their parts are the part is only to be a servant to someone rather than being their own person. They don't really have a backstory. There's not really much to them other than what, they're given. And so, of course, there's, yeah, pretty obvious. I mean, you have a movie that didn't give people of color, a Black person, a role to play other than a servant. So, yeah, I mean, that is pretty offensive. And so I don't know why this movie, out of every movie that has been done that's completely insensitive, is the only one that during that time needed to be taken down. But okay, they just said, okay, we'll pick a movie. We'll choose one from 1939, which to a certain point, we understand the extent of that time and how it's appropriate for that time compared to you can't do a movie about 2020 and then that's the roles that Black people get. Of course, we know that doesn't make sense because there's slavery, but like in a different way. But we're not going to get into all that. So, yes, HBO took it down, but then they put it back up, and it was only within a week. But it's almost like they wanted to turn it into a lesson. So to say, yes, this movie is insensitive, but it's a lesson within it. And it's like it's a teachable moment. Because of course there's things in history we're supposedly taught, even though there's a lot of stuff taken out of history. So, but that's besides the point. But generally we teach history so that it doesn't repeat itself. And so this is a teachable movie, about racism, how, you don't treat people less than, and how, it's just a lot that you can learn. So they put a 4-minute intro They did a scholarly 4-minute intro that basically put the dated view of a romantic antebellum Southern plantation life supported by slavery into perspective. So they're basically saying, we understand that this isn't appropriate now, but this is appropriate for its particular time. And they also included a discussion panel. Now, when I got this off IMDb, it says Gone with the Wind, A Complicated Legacy. And I just wanted to Google it on YouTube to see, okay, well, what is that about? That was very interesting. And it's titled A Complicated Legacy, Gone with the Wind. And they have 4 panelists, producers, writers, movie critics, and they're all discussing the movie and the characters, of course, dealing with the racism in it, and also just talking about the characters themselves. And I watched a little bit of it, and it was very insightful. So I recommend after this, if you want some real insight into the movie, definitely check that out. Okay, so just to kind of get into some cast here, they had main players in the movie that were repeated, and they also had some that were in the background. But I'm just gonna kind of just give some that are the biggest players in this movie. We have Vivian Lee, which this was my first movie I've ever seen her in. She plays the Scarlett O'Hara. I always want to say O'Hare, but it's O'Hara, I believe. And if I'm saying that wrong, Sorry about it. Okay, we have Hattie McDaniel, who was the first Black woman to win Best Supporting Actress. And then we have Thomas Mitchell. He played Gerald O'Hara. Butterfly McQueen, who played Prissy. And I thought it was crazy because I've never really heard, like, I've heard that name, but not in context of who she is or what she's actually been in. And the whole movie, I was waiting for someone to say Butterfly McQueen. And I was like, well, who's that character? Because I thought that name was the character's name in the movie. And then I was like, she was Prissy. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's such a unique name. And I believe that's her stage name. I don't know if that was her real name. But then we have Olivia de Havilland, who played Melanie Hamilton. Leslie Howard played Ashley Wilkes. Harry Davenport played Dr. Mead. Clark Gable played Rhett Butler. I've heard about Clark Gable a lot. So this was my first Clark Gable movie, seeing him in. We have Evelyn Keyes, who played Sue Ellen. Barbara O'Neill, who played Ellen. George Reeves, who played Stuart Tarleton. Fred Crane, who played Brent Tarleton. And, of course, there's many others that kind of, make their way into the movie. But those, like I said, those are just, like, the main players in the movies. And some that are actually mentioned when I talk about the movie. Okay, so this movie, the time period is the 1800s. And it's in the state of Georgia. And the opening of this movie is, they literally explain that this was a good time, when you had your master and your slave, and just life was beautiful. So the South is really glamorized in all of their efforts and attributes, and how they made a way for themselves and how they made a way for Black people, even though they were slaves. But that is the big point in the beginning, is just how great the South was in its time. So we first get introduced to Scarlett O'Hara, and we learn that her family's well off. They own this plantation, which is called Tara. And Tara is talked about. It's like a big thing throughout the whole movie. So they own this plantation. They have their own slaves. They have overseers. They're a very well-off family. And so we meet Scarlett, who has two sisters, which are Sue Ellen and India, I believe. Yes. And so in the very beginning of the movie, we see actually Scarlett talking to two men, because this is when we're first really realizing the power that Scarlett has. And we're also realizing how much of a interesting person Scarlett is. Scarlett isn't your typical woman, okay? Especially in a movie in this time. Scarlett is all about Scarlett. And if it's not about Scarlett, then what are we talking about type of person? So we're at a time where it seems like the North and South are going to be going to war against each other because, well, what we know as the Civil War. And of course, with South and their ways and how things are, they're very confident that they are going to win. And it's actually something they're excited about. No one is dreading war coming. They're actually super excited because then their values, their laws, the way they run life, of course, if they win, then that's going to be something that's going to be spread across the nation rather than just where it is. Because the North and South laws at that time, I'm pretty sure were pretty different, because the values and, keeping slaves, not keeping slaves, it just, it was just very different. You always hear people talk about how it is up north versus the south. So everybody was super excited about it. But of course, Scarlett is like, why are we talking about war? We don't care, because the two guys are talking to her about it. So she doesn't really care, doesn't really interest her. Her main thing is she has her eyes on a particular beau. And that is Ashley Wilkes, okay? When I tell you, she is so in love with this man, I would die for you type of stuff, okay? She loves some Ashley. And Ashley is actually the son of another plantation owner that's not that far from them called 12 Oaks. And she is absolutely in love with him and she wants to be with him. Now, she ends up finding out because they're about to have this ball, this almost like mixer where, you know, all the women and all the available guys are going to like be together in one setting, but everyone is trying to pretty much find their suitor to see who they match up with. And before Scarlett goes to this mixer, I guess you could say, she already has her eyes on who she wants, but she ends up finding out that he has plans to marry another woman, which her name is Melanie. And of course, she's very upset about this, but since she's a very determined woman and whenever she has the eyes on the prize, she's going to go for it, okay? So whenever she goes to this party, she sees Ashley there, and you know, instantly she wants alone time with him. She wants to talk to him because she has to convince him to marry her because this is the absolute love of her life. But we get a glimpse of how desired Scarlett is amongst those are all the guys around her. Most of the guys are kind of want her, and she has all these people that want her, and yet she only has eyes on one person, and this one person is the only person that doesn't want her. And you know, that's typically how it goes in life. Is you always want the person who doesn't want you. You're going to chase the person who's running from you. And you have all these other people that are standing in line willing to drink your bath water. And yet you're like, no, I don't want you. So we're steady getting, you know, these glimpses of who Scarlett really is because she's a really cutthroat person. And at one point when Ashley and her are speaking, you know, she's like trying to get him in alone with them. And he's like, oh, well, I got to go talk to Melanie. Hey, you should go say hi to Melanie. You know, of course, just being cordial, you know, nice. And she's just like, just has this disdained look on her face. Like, she's like, oh my God, I can't stand her. Like, being honest, like, I don't want to talk to her. Like, I'm trying to talk to you. But of course, he doesn't want Scarlett like that. So he's still making a point to, you know, go and talk to Melanie because he's like, I know you went a long time with me, but, you know, I have other things to do because he knows her feelings towards him. She doesn't have to convince him nothing, but he knows that he can't reciprocate that. And we're going to learn this throughout the freaking story. It's crazy, y'all. Then we learn about another character. So, you know, so far we have, you know, we've met her sisters, we met her dad, her family, her mom, Ashley. And then at this little party, we learn about Rhett, who is a main player in the film as well. And Rhett becomes the cat chasing the mouse, okay? So just like Scarlett is chasing Ashley, Rhett begins to chase Scarlett because he instantly sees her, finds something in her that he loves, and so he's like, okay. And we learn a little bit about his character, that basically his family is like the black sheep amongst all the families in that area. He doesn't have the best reputation. That I mean, I couldn't really figure out what was the bad reputation he had. I don't know if he kind of just went from place to place, or the people he mingled with, but he just did not have the best reputation. And so, of course, initially when Scarlett learns about him, of course, her interest is spiked a little bit, but then that quickly goes away when her focus goes back onto trying to get access to her Ashley. So then, at one point, and I guess this was common during parties, or maybe if the parties were long, or I don't know if this was a thing back then, but all the women are supposed to nap at a certain point. So, they undress, they all sleep in this room. But of course, since Scarlett is on her mission, she's like, yeah, I can't go to sleep. Or actually, I won't go to sleep. Let me get Ashley alone like I was trying to do earlier. So she does end up, getting dressed. And she is on the hunt. She's going to look for Ashley because this is the perfect timing. All the girls are asleep. I can get him to myself finally. So as she is looking around for Ashley, we get to a scene where we see all of the men gather together and they're talking about war and basically how they're ready for it. They're excited about it. And pretty much at the drop of a pin, if they say that it's going to happen, they are ready. And these guys are going to volunteer. They're going to enlist. No one is backing away from it. They're actually hoping that this is something that's going to happen. So then at some point, Rhett, he's within the discussion and, he's talking about it, but of course the guys they don't like him, and it's tension between them and him. He's definitely the outcast. And so at one point he ends up leaving, and the men ask Ashley to go after him just to make sure he's not going to be starting anything. And that is Scarlett's moment to get Ashley alone. She gets him alone in this room and she starts confessing her love, which she's going to do multiple times throughout this 3-hour and 58-minute film. It's like, girl, I mean, and mind you, it's 3 hours for us, but this is years in the making. And this is just that one person. That's it for her. So she gets him in the room. She's confessing her love for him. And he tells her, like, I'm going to marry Melanie, but I love you, but you're not woman enough, and you're not ready to be married. And of course this hurts Scarlett because she's thinking that she is the perfect person for Ashley. And yet Ashley has his heart with someone else. And he even at one moment kisses her. And you cannot tell a woman that you hate her and then caress her cheek, because all she's going to think about is that you caressed her cheek and that you do love her. You just haven't realized it yet. So he's giving really mixed emotions, because you do kind of feel like he does love her. He's just holding back. But I guess he is what you would call in today's terms a F-boy. Like playing games. Like, I'm going to lead you on, but I never have any intention of being with you. So Ashley's basically like, I'm not going to be with you. I'm going to marry Melanie. That's who I love. And that's it. And he leaves the room. And then we discover, because he was going after Rhett to go find him, that Rhett was actually in that room the whole time, because Scarlett gets mad. She throws something across the room. It breaks. And Rhett gets up from the couch because he was laying across it. And the back of the couch was to the couple, so you couldn't see who was on it. And he's like, he says a lot. He says, has the war started? And so then this is their first interaction together. And this is the start of their dynamic, their tumultuous dynamic, love-hate relationship. Love from Rhett, hate from Vivian, and some hate from Rhett, and maybe some love from Scarlett. I said Vivian, I meant Scarlett. Y'all know what I mean. So yeah, so this is the beginning of the relationship because one, he now knows how she feels about Ashley, and mind you, no one else really has a glimpse into how much she cares about Ashley at this point. She's kind of kept it hidden, and her and Ashley are the only one who knows about their relationship. And of course, Rhett heard the kissing, and he knows exactly how she feels about him. But then he kind of insinuates that, well, let me know once you get over him so we can be together. Because he's letting her know, I'm interested. And of course, she has her eyes set on Ashley, so she's like, whatever. And she takes what he says with a grain of salt. She really doesn't care. After that, Scarlett ends up running out of the room because she's upset. And all the ladies have woken up, they've gotten dressed, and they're coming downstairs. And she ends up hearing Melanie and India and two other girls that are talking about her. So she quickly ducks off on the side or the back of the staircase as they're walking down the staircase. And she hears that basically India is talking ill, and she feels like Scarlett acts like the loose lady of the night, and she just throws herself all over the guys. Like, she's thrown herself off on everyone. And, everyone has in mind particular suitors that they want. And I feel like it's kind of like an unwritten rule amongst the ladies. Like, what guy I'm going for, don't go for them. But at the same time, Melanie is defending Scarlett, and she just thinks that, she's just a strong-willed person. That's just the way she is. And that, she's a fine girl. Like, we shouldn't, judge her for the way that she acts. Like, she's good. That's just who she is. But of course, the other ladies are definitely not fond of her at all. And the irony of it is Melanie is defending a woman that absolutely hates her because she has the heart of the man of her dreams. And then we get to the point where war has actually begun. So this is actually all happening like within the same day, right? I'm like, that's a lot already. So this is all happening within the same day. So the war begins. The guys are happy. They're running out the house. They're jumping in there, a horse and wagon and jumping in their cars and stuff, and they're ready. Like, they're ready to enlist. They're pumped. The time has finally come, and they're just ready to get into this war and win, because that's what their anticipation is. And so at this point, Charles Hamilton, who is Melanie's sister, confesses his love to Scarlett. And basically he says, will you marry me? Because I've always loved you. I always will love you. Marry me. So in Scarlett's mind, she doesn't go, oh, well, you know what? Maybe this is the best guy for me. Let me be with him. Her thought process instead is, well, maybe this will make Ashley jealous if I marry another man, which happens to be Melanie, Melanie's brother. And Melanie, of course, Ashley is going to marry Melanie, and Charles is Melanie's brother. So this is her way to be close to him, right? To be close to him. So, because she can't marry him, so how else is she gonna be underneath him? So then she ends up agreeing to marry him only because she wants to make Ashley jealous. So then as the war is going on, they're sending back letters. There's like, one interesting thing about this film is there are things that aren't like scenes set up and showing what's going on. They'll have letters written or words written where you have to read it in certain parts of the film. And so we actually learned a letter that got sent to Scarlett is that Charles contracted the measles while he had pneumonia in the war. So he ends up dying from it. And this obviously makes Scarlett a widow. And of course, she isn't sad that he died or that she lost her husband. She becomes upset because she has to wear all black and has to stay inside and mourn for her quote unquote husband. And this is just yet another example of how narcissistic Scarlett is. And throughout the movie, like, okay, I'm not going to get there yet, but we just see how narcissistic she is. She doesn't care that, he died or even feel some ounce of remorse or sympathy. The only sympathy she can gain is for herself, that she has to sit inside because I guess that was not the law, but it was just something that people, or in that time, you were supposed to, when someone dies, well, this is how they portray in the movie. I don't know if this was really like this in the 30s, or not the 30s, but in the 1800s. But if your husband dies, you are denied of all fun because you shouldn't be having fun with your husband dead. That's just not how it works. And she, of course, doesn't like this because, one, she didn't want to marry him. And two, she wants to live her life and she wants to dress beautifully and she wants to go out and she wants to do as she pleases. But she can't because of this. And so then her mom actually suggests to her that she go out and, well, actually, her mom suggests that she gets out the house, okay? And at first she suggests that she go stay in Savannah. And then she comes up with the idea that she should go stay in Atlanta with Melanie. Now, mind you, Scarlett doesn't like Melanie. But she thinks it's a good idea because she will be close to who? Ashley. And at one point, Mammy, and throughout this, Mammy plays a very prominent role. So even though she is the house slave or the maid, she is in a bunch of scenes and she has a bunch of lines as well. Which I think is another different thing for this time period. Because normally slave or main characters are D characters or extras just to dress the characters or to just add to the environment. But they don't have any real substance. But Mammy somewhat had the ability to embody the character she was given and to create a pretty dynamic role for herself, especially during that period. So, yes, Scarlett decides to go to Atlanta to help out Melanie because at this point they both had their husbands in war. Of course, her husband has died, but Ashley is still fighting in the war. And at this point, her and Melanie are sister-in-laws. So they're sisters. So it wouldn't seem like a terrible thing for her to go stay with Melanie, even though we know her real intentions are. Because this is just yet another way for her to become close or to be close to Ashley whenever he gets back in town. So when Scarlett goes to Atlanta, she's actually helping out Melanie with the Monsters Bazaar, which is a party to help benefit the military. And this is unusual for a lady in mourning to be out at a party like this, at a party like this, we're supposed to be festive, you dance, you have fun, you're mingling with people, and this is yet something that doesn't look good for a widower. But they make an exception because they know she's not there to do all of that extra stuff. She's just there to help her family, technically. And so we end up getting introduced to Red again. He does make an appearance. And this actually startles Scarlett because their dynamic is he now knows one secret that no one else knows about her. And that is what their relationship is kind of keeping the peace with that, because if someone knows a secret about you, you don't want them blabbing and, telling everybody. But at the same time, Rhett is not the type of person to hold that against her. It's almost like they mutually know what's going on, but he makes it clear that that's not his intention to tell what he's heard to Melanie or anyone else. He kind of plays with her and they have banter together, but that's what it is. It's simply playful. It's not malicious or with ill intentions or anything that could sabotage her relationship with Melanie or Ashley or anything like that. So then at this party, a bid begins where, of course, they're helping raise money for the military. So they have a bid where men can pay to dance with a certain woman that's there. And Rhett actually bids on Scarlett. And this is Dr. Mead who was running it. And, Dr. Mead, he's a prominent character that we hear throughout the story. But once again, it's brought up that, a widower is not supposed to be dancing. They're supposed to be just mourning. That's it. They're not supposed to have any fun. But because of Rhett and who he is, they allow him to still bid on her. And he does it because he knows that she actually does want to dance and have fun. And he's actually the one person that really knows who she is. And that's also something else with their dynamic. Everyone else is pretty oblivious, or even if they are aware, they kind of they don't bring attention to it, or they don't call her out on it. They just kind of know how she is and go with the flow. But Rhett is the one person I do feel like knows her better than anyone else. And she can be more honest with him, even though sometimes her honesty is just through irritation or anger. But I do feel that she does get to be her, because she is a pretty horrible person, but she gets to be the worst person with him. And he doesn't really judge her for it. I guess that actually attracts him more to her because of that aspect. And I think that's what he maybe fell in love with, other than her looks. But yeah, so he knows she wants to dance. He bids on it. They dance together. And of course, he makes it clear once again that he wants her to feel the same way about him as she does about Ashley. But of course, Scarlett denies him, rejects him, does not want him at all. And just like he makes it clear that he wants her, she makes it clear she doesn't want him. But yet he persists the same way she does with Ashley. So then they do start building more of a relationship, and he starts coming over more, or coming to her place where she's staying with Melanie, and he buys her gifts, and we're seeing more like I guess they're kind of like, it's like they're friends or frenemies, but they're friends but they're not friends, because Rhett is in it to eventually be with her, and Scarlett's in it because he has money, he can get her things, he has status. So she's the type of person that whatever she can do to win in life, she's gonna go with that. But at the same time, with Rhett, she can be herself, and he's still not going to cut her off because of that. So then we do see a little bit of chemistry between them. But I think most of the chemistry comes from the fact that if she plays a little bit to him, like giving him some sort of hope, then if she keeps him around, she can keep getting what she wants from him. But not that she actually wants him, if that makes sense. And of course, it's like he's a sucker for her, so it doesn't really matter how she treats him. He's still gonna pop up, and he's still gonna stay in her life because he does genuinely care for her, and he does prove that he wants to be with her. So then after some time, there comes a point that, the war has gone on long enough that they are bringing news to everybody about anyone that has not made it in the war so far. And it's like everyone is gathering around. Everyone is gathering in Atlanta, because there's one place where you can get this information. And of course, some people get bad news. They see that their loved ones didn't make it. But luckily for Melanie and Scarlett, they don't see Ashley's name on the list, which of course makes Melanie, the wife, super happy, and it makes Scarlett happy too. So it's like these two women who really care about this one man, but one's the actual wife. And once again, Melanie, she mentions to Scarlett, I'm so glad you care about Ashley the way I do. And this is one of those, I guess, a debate you can have is, does she choose to not pay attention to who Scarlett really is, or is she actually oblivious to who Scarlett is? And just from Melanie's character, she's very kind, she's very soft, she's very compassionate, the complete opposite of Scarlett. And I feel like she chooses to see the bad, she chooses to see the good in people, and Scarlett chooses to get what she wants from people. And I guess the simplest terms of that. So it's like, yeah, Scarlett cares as much as Ashley because she wishes that was her husband. And at this point, we don't realize if Melanie knows how much she loves Ashley in more ways than just, like, technically that being her brother-in-law. So then Ashley does end up coming back home, and it's pretty bittersweet because she's happy that he's alive, but then at the same time, she's upset because he is not hers. And at this point, what we're realizing in the war is that the South is not looking too good. The confidence of the South actually prevailing in this war, it's not looking too good. So all that anticipation, all of that confidence, you can tell is sort of dying down. And then we're actually going into the second attempt that Scarlett makes to confess her love to Ashley and to convince him to be with her. But of course he rejects her because at this point he is a married man. And even though he's telling her that, he loves his wife, he wants to be with her, he does kiss her. And actions and words become tricky when you choose which one to believe. You can choose that him kissing me means he's actually in love with me, or I can listen to what he says and says, even though he's kissing me, I know this will never work. But of course, Scarlett in her mind is completely in love with this man. She is going to believe his actions, which he's still embracing her. He's still kissing her. And she feels, and that keeps giving her a glimmer of hope that one day they could actually be together, but she just has to find some way or some word to really trigger and make him believe that, yes, she is the one for him. But he ultimately tells her that the only favor I want you to do for me is to watch over Melanie, which is the one he truly cares about. And he makes that clear, but at the same time, he's sticking his tongue down her throat. So it's just it's not black and white. I guess it's pretty complicated, but man, why are you leading this girl on? She is in love with you. Like, that's a whole nother subject, but I hate when people do that. I guess whether you're a guy doing it or a girl doing it, that's just so wrong to lead someone on. But then at the same time, you don't feel bad for the person because you're adult enough to realize that, you hear this person is literally telling you they don't love you. But because of what they're doing to you physically, that you think that there's still some hope. It's sad, y'all. And then when Ashley tells her, just look over my wife for me, Scarlett is resentful of her because she's like, Like, I love you. I should be with you, but you want me to look after her? And of course, she's gonna do it because Scarlett is the closest thing she's gonna have to being around Ashley. So, okay, at this point, since the war, is not looking too good for the South, because at this point, what they're calling the Yankees, the people up north, are actually getting some headway, and they're winning the war, and they're infiltrating. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but they're starting to get into Georgia, and the war is leading into Georgia as well. Now, mind you, this is their home that they take pride in, that they love, and that they love the way things are. And now you have these Yankees that are coming in to destroy everything and to kill their people, the people that they love, the people that they care about, and to just, change things the way they know it. And so soldiers are beginning to return with, crazy injuries. They're needing hospitalization. And it's starting to become a challenge to be able to, keep up with, because there's so many injured soldiers that have, came back. And at this point, since, the Yankees are actually like coming into the state, and, they're coming in, guns are blazing, they're destroying things, they're just getting more headway than what the South anticipated, that people are now trying to leave town. They're trying to go even further south, to try to get away from all of this, to try to avoid being killed or injured or hurt, because they know that things are just changing. And when they get in there, the Yankees get in there, they're not going to they're not there to say hello and sit down and, eat some lunch with them. They're really kicking out some doors and creating madness there, shaking things up. So Scarlett works at this hospital where all these injured soldiers are. But again, we're seeing how she has not changed yet. And this is one of the crazy things about this film, or about this character. The crazy thing about her character is we're so used to seeing how someone is, how they're set in their ways, their morals, their values, wherever the case may be, right? But with Scarlett, she is very consistent in who she is. She may change it up a little bit in her tactics of how she approaches people or how she approaches situations, but she is always the same person, and she is consistent. And you would think, after seeing injured people, after seeing the love of her life really show his love for the woman he's with, or just these different things, it still doesn't warm up her heart. She's still such a cold, self-centered, narcissistic person. It just doesn't change. And so working at this hospital is ironic, because she doesn't have compassion for people. She doesn't care about people. She is just in the interest of Scarlett. And of course, working at a hospital is not the best place for Scarlett to work, because she just doesn't have investment in other people as she does into herself. So she does end up running into some familiar people that she remembers from her plantation. And it's his name was actually Big Sam. Because, okay, at the point where she's in the hospital, like I was saying, she doesn't have an investment in people. She doesn't care. So, one person's like having to get their leg amputated, and she just can't. I guess that was her breaking point. She can't take it anymore. So she's like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm getting out of the hospital. And then out of the hospital, you see everybody running around, everybody leaving town, everybody just scattered, just trying to get away, trying to find some shelter, somewhere to go because of everything that's happening. And then she runs into Big Sam, who used to work on her plantation, and of course he's a familiar face, so she's like, oh my god, how's everything back home? And Tara, because she's moved away from Tara, and she's been away from Tara for some years. And Big Sam ends up letting her know that her mom is actually sick. So then once she hears this news, this kind of elevates her urgency in wanting to leave like everyone else, because everyone else is leaving. She doesn't want to stay behind and get killed or hurt or, be in this mess of what's happening. So she wants to go back home. And she ends up meeting with Rhett once again. It's like Rhett it's these certain stages in her life that he just pops up, and it's almost like, well, are you over that guy? You ready to be with me? And of course she's not. She's still not over Ashley. But she does see him. He offers to even leave with her, because she mentions like, hey, I'm trying to get out of here. And he's like, okay, well, we could just go away together. So then she ends up going to, Melanie's place. She's ready to pack up, leave. But at this point, Melanie is pregnant. And she remembers, one, what Ashley promised her to do, which was help take care of Melanie. And then two, Dr. Mead tells her that she can't leave because she has to help take care of Melanie. Like, who else is going to be by Melanie's side if you leave, which is true, because Melanie she had her aunt, I believe. I don't know if she was the aunt on Melanie's side or Scarlett's side, but the aunt is dipping out. She's not even staying there. And so she's like, Dr. Mead's like, you can't. So he basically guilt her into staying there, even though Scarlett wants to leave because she wants to go back to Tara because she loves Tara. And two, her mom is sick, and she doesn't know if her mom could pass away at any point, so she wants to go see her. But Dr. Mead convinces her to stay, and I mean, pretty much at this point, Rhett's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're not going away together, so I'm just gonna leave. But of course, he'll be back. All right, so then some more time passes, and at this point, Melanie is actually going to be having her baby. And this is at the point where, like, the Yankees have actually came into town. Not exactly where they're at, but they're, like, super close. And at this point, the military's even evacuating. So they're even leaving. And so we had the hospital full of injured soldiers. Now we literally have like these acres set up, like just land outside set up to help take care of these injured soldiers, because there's so many at this point. And what's cool about this scene, because, okay, well, let me go back a little bit. So Melanie's about to have her baby, and I guess the only doctor in town is Dr. Mead. And so she tries to fetch him to come help her deliver the baby. When she goes to fetch him, he's out there in the field where they have all these injured soldiers. And this scene needed like so many soldiers out there. And of course, they weren't able to fulfill all of the extra roles of the soldiers. So they end up putting dummies out there mixed in with the real people. And if you look real closely, like if you can't notice initially, if you're just watching, then you won't notice. But because I knew that, I was looking, I could see dummies there. And I mean, it looks good for its time. It looks really good. Like they do this aerial shot, and like it's really good. And so Scarlett goes out there. She tries to get Mr. Mead to help her deliver the baby. But he's like, you think I'm going to deliver a baby over helping these wounded soldiers? Oh, man, you got the game all messed up. So he can't go and help her with the baby. But previously, before, when Scarlett was going to leave, she had her help Prissy, which is Butterfly McQueen, who had said that whenever the baby was to be delivered, that she would help Dr. Mead because she's delivered a bunch of babies before. So at this point, when Scarlett realizes that she will have to be the one to deliver the baby, she is at least happy that she has someone like Butterfly McQueen who can help her, or Prissy, the character. But then Prissy admits that and this is one of the famous lines from Gone with the Wind, is she goes something to the effect of, I ain't never delivered no babies before. And so this obviously makes Scarlett upset. And she realizes, okay, I'm really going to have to do this on my own. So she ends up delivering the baby. But then she has Percy go out to find Rhett so he can help her get out of town, because at this point she's not staying there anymore. She absolutely refuses to stay in town because she's not going to be here while everything is going to be destroyed, okay? And she's not going to get killed. And she wants to go back to Tara to, see her mom. So they end up getting Rhett. He ends up,